The rain was falling hard on the glass walls of Sterling Tower that Tuesday morning. Inside the huge building where millions of dollars were made and lost every day. Nobody paid attention to the quiet woman pushing her cleaning cart through the marble hallways. Maria Santos had worked there for 8 months, always arriving before sunrise, always leaving after dark. At 55 years old, she had learned to make herself invisible. Her uniform was always clean, her graying hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her brown eyes held secrets that nobody in that fancy building would ever guess. She cleaned the offices of people who made more money in one day than she made in a whole year, but Maria never complained. She had bigger worries on her mind, worries that kept her awake at night and made her hands shake sometimes when she thought nobody was looking. On the 32nd floor of Sterling Tower lived a problem that money couldn't fix. Isabella Sterling was only 7 years old, but she had already broken the hearts and minds of 12 different nannies, 6 therapists, and 3 special education teachers. Her father, James Sterling, was one of the richest men in the city. He owned hotels, restaurants, and technology companies around the world. But all his money, all his power, all his connections meant nothing when it came to his daughter. Isabella had not spoken a single word in over 4 months. She spent her days hiding under tables, drawing pictures of storms and darkness, and screaming whenever anyone tried to touch her or even come too close. The doctors called it severe trauma response. James called it his worst nightmare. The little girl's mother had died in a terrible car accident just 6 months earlier. Since that day, Isabella had become like a wild animal, scared of everyone and everything. She would throw food across the room, tear up her clothes, and lock herself in closets for hours. The mansion they lived in felt more like a prison now. James had tried everything he could think of. He hired the best doctors from around the world. He bought her every toy and game that existed. He even built her a playground in their backyard that cost more than most people's houses. But nothing worked. Isabella just kept getting worse, and James was running out of hope. His business was suffering because he couldn't focus. His friends had stopped calling because he never wanted to talk about anything except his daughters. Problems he felt like he was drowning, and there was nobody who could save him. The breaking point came on a cold Wednesday morning in November. James had brought Isabella to his office because the newest nanny had quit in the middle of the night, leaving only a note that said she was sorry but couldn't handle it anymore. Isabella sat in the corner of his huge office, rocking back and forth, humming a tune that sounded scary and sad at the same time. She had dark circles under her green eyes, and her beautiful curly hair was tangled because she wouldn't let anyone brush it. James was trying to have an important meeting with some business partners from Japan, but every few minutes, Isabella would let out a terrible scream that made everyone in the room jump. The Japanese men looked uncomfortable and kept checking their watches. Finally, the lead businessman stood up and said very politely that maybe they should reschedule the meeting. After they left, James sat alone in his office, watching his daughter rock back and forth, and he started to cry for the first time since his wife's funeral. That's when Maria saw them. She was cleaning the windows outside James's office when she heard the little girl's cries. Through the glass, she could see the rich man in his expensive suit, holding his head in his hands while his daughter sat alone in the corner. Maria's heart broke a little bit. She had seen pain before, real pain that money couldn't fix. She knew what it looked like when a child was lost in their own sadness. Without really thinking about it, Maria knocked softly on the office door. James looked up, surprised. Nobody ever knocked on his door except his secretary, and she had gone home sick that day. He pressed a button and the door unlocked. Maria stepped inside carefully, like she was entering a church. "Excuse me, sir," Maria said in her soft voice that carried just a hint of her Mexican accent. "I couldn't help but notice. The little girl seems upset." James looked at her strangely. In all the months Maria had been cleaning his building, they had never spoken before. He wasn't even sure he knew her name. "She's been like this for months," he said, his voice tired and defeated. "Nobody can help her. The doctors, the specialists, nobody." Maria looked at Isabella, who had stopped rocking and was now staring at the janitor with curious eyes. "What's her name?" Maria asked. "Isabella," James replied. "Isabella," Maria repeated softly, and something magical happened. The little girl tilted her head like she was hearing her name for the first time in months. Maria slowly walked across the huge office, her cleaning cart squeaking softly on the marble floor. She stopped about 10 feet away from Isabella and sat down on the ground, not caring that her uniform would get dirty on the expensive carpet. "Hola, Isabella," Maria said. In Spanish, her voice gentle like a lullaby. "My name is Maria. I clean the windows in this big building." Isabella stared at her with wide eyes. Nobody had ever sat on the floor to talk to her before. All the doctors and nannies always stood up tall, looking down at her like she was a broken toy they needed to fix. But Maria was different. She reached into the pocket of her uniform and pulled out a small, colorful piece of paper. It was an origami butterfly that she had folded during her lunch break. She placed it on the carpet between them and then scooted back a little bit. Isabella looked at the paper butterfly, then at Maria, then back at the butterfly. Slowly, very slowly, she crawled forward and picked up the delicate creation. For the first time in months, Isabella smiled. It was just a tiny smile, barely there, but James saw it from across the room, and he felt like his heart might explode with hope. Maria visited Isabella every day after that. She would come to James's office during her lunch break and sit on the floor with the little girl. She never tried to hug Isabella or force her to talk. Instead, she would fold paper animals, tell stories in both English and Spanish, and sometimes just sit quietly while Isabella drew her dark pictures. Slowly, very slowly, things began to change. Isabella started eating her lunch instead of throwing it. She stopped screaming when people walked into the room. She even let Maria brush her hair, something that nobody had been able to do for months. James watched these small miracles happen every day, and he couldn't understand it. How was this quiet janitor doing what all his expensive experts couldn't do? One afternoon, James decided to ask Maria directly. "How are you reaching her when nobody else can?" He wanted to know. Maria was sitting on the floor, showing Isabella how to fold a paper crane. She looked up at James with her kind brown eyes and said, "Sometimes, sir, when someone is drowning in sadness, they don't need someone to pull them out of the water. They need someone to get in the water with them and show them they're not alone." James stared at her, not fully understanding what she meant, but knowing somehow that it was important. "Where did you learn to work with children like this?" he asked. Maria's hands stopped folding the paper. She was quiet for a long moment, and James could see pain flash across her face. "I learned from experience, sir," she said softly. "Sometimes the hardest lessons in life teach us how to help others." As the weeks went by, Isabella continued to improve. She started speaking single words, then short sentences. She would ask Maria about her day, about the paper animals, about the stories she told. James was amazed and grateful, but he was also curious about this woman who had saved his daughter when nobody else could. He decided to find out more about Maria Santos. He asked his security team to pull her employment file, and what he found shocked him. Maria had almost no work history before coming to Sterling Tower. There was a long gap of several years where she seemed to have disappeared completely. James hired a private investigator to dig deeper, and what the man found made James's blood run cold. Maria Santos had once been married to a man named Carlos Santos. They had lived in a small apartment across town with their 8-year-old son, Diego. Diego had been born with a rare condition that made him different from other children. He had trouble learning and sometimes got very upset and scared, just like Isabella. Maria had quit her job at a hotel to take care of Diego full-time. She became an expert at calming him down when he had his episodes. She learned how to make him feel safe when the world felt too scary. For 3 years, Maria dedicated her entire life to helping her son. But then, one terrible night, Carlos had been drinking. He had been drinking a lot lately because he couldn't handle having a son who was different. He was ashamed and angry, and he took that anger out on Maria and Diego. The police report was hard for James to read. Carlos had hit Diego during one of the boys' episodes, trying to make him stop crying. Diego had fallen and hit his head on the kitchen table. He died 3 days later in the hospital, never waking up from his coma. Maria had tried to protect her son, and Carlos had beaten her so badly that she spent 2 weeks in the hospital. When she got out, Carlos was in jail, and Diego was gone forever. Maria had lost everything that mattered to her. She moved to a different part of the city, changed her name slightly, and disappeared into jobs where nobody would ask questions about her past. For years, she worked as a night janitor in different buildings, always alone, always quiet, carrying the weight of her grief like a stone in her chest. James sat in his office that night, reading the report over and over again. He finally understood why Maria was so good with Isabella. She had loved a child who was different, who was struggling, who needed special patience and understanding. She had failed to protect her own son, but now she was saving James's daughter. It all made sense, but it also made James feel terrible. This woman had suffered more than he could imagine, and she was using that suffering to heal his child. He didn't know what to do with this information. Should he tell Maria that he knew? Should he pretend he never found out? Should he fire her because she had lied on her application? James spent the whole night thinking about it, and by morning he knew what he had to do. The next day, James asked Maria to stay after Isabella had gone home with the new nanny, a kind, older woman who Isabella actually seemed to like, thanks to all of Maria's work. "Maria," James said gently, "I know about Diego." Maria's face went completely white. She sat down heavily in one of the leather chairs, and James could see her hands shaking. "I'm sorry I lied on my application," she whispered. "I know you probably have to fire me now." James shook his head. "I'm not going to fire you, Maria. I'm going to thank you. You saved my daughter's life, and you saved mine too. But I need to know, why didn't you tell me about your experience with children like Isabella and Diego?" Maria looked out the window at the city lights twinkling in the darkness. "Because people hear a story like mine, and they either feel sorry for you or they think, 'You're broken,'" she said. "I didn't want you to hire me because you felt bad for me. I wanted to help Isabella because I saw myself in her. I saw Diego in her. I know what it's like to be lost in sadness and fear. I know what it's like when the world feels too big and scary to handle. And I know that sometimes the only way to find your way out is to have someone sit with you in the darkness until you're ready to look for the light." James felt tears in his eyes. "Maria, I want to offer you a different job. I want you to be Isabella's full-time caregiver. I'll pay you whatever you want. You can live in our house, or I'll buy you a house nearby, whatever you prefer. Isabella needs you, and honestly, I need you too. I don't know how to help her the way you do." Maria was quiet for a long time. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Sterling, but I can't take it," she finally said. James was shocked. "Why not?" he asked. "Because," Maria said softly, "if I become Isabella's employee, if I become just another person you've hired to take care of her, I'll lose the thing that makes me special to her. Right now, I'm just Maria. I'm not trying to fix her or change her or make her into something she's not." I'm just her friend who sits on the floor and folds paper animals with her. If you pay me to do that, it becomes a job, and Isabella will feel the difference." James thought about what she said, and he realized she was right. "But how can I thank you?" he asked. "How can I show you how grateful I am for what you've done?" Maria smiled, the first real smile James had ever seen from her. "Let me keep being Isabella's friend," she said. "Let me keep coming to visit her. During my lunch breaks, let me keep folding paper with her and telling her stories. Don't try to make it into something official or professional. Just let it be what it is to people who understand each other's pain, helping each other heal." From that day forward, James made sure that Maria's work schedule always gave her time to spend with Isabella. He gave her a raise, but he did it quietly, without making a big deal about it. He made sure she had health insurance and paid time off. He took care of her in the way he would take care of family, but he never made it feel like charity. Maria continued to work as a janitor during the day and be Isabella's friend during lunch. Isabella continued to improve, slowly but surely. She started going to school again. She made friends with other children. She learned to laugh and play and be silly, the way 7-year-old girls should be. One day, about a year after Maria had first knocked on James's office door, Isabella came running up to her during lunch break with a huge smile on her face. Maria, guess what happened at school today?" she said, bouncing up and down with excitement. "Tell me, mi amor," Maria said, using the Spanish pet name she had started calling Isabella. "We had show and tell, and I brought the paper butterfly. You made me on the first day we met. I told everyone about how you taught me that sometimes beautiful things come from simple pieces of paper, just like how beautiful friendships can come from sad times. And you know what? Tommy Rodriguez said his grandma makes paper flowers, and she's going to teach our whole class how to do it next week." Maria's eyes filled with tears, but they were happy tears. "That's wonderful, Isabella. I'm so proud of you for sharing something special with your classmates." Isabella hugged Maria tightly. "I love you, Maria. You're the best friend I ever had." Maria hugged her back, thinking about Diego, thinking about all the paper animals. She would never get to fold with him, but feeling grateful that she could fold them with Isabella instead. "I love you too, mi amor. You're the best friend I ever had too." James watched this exchange from his office window, and he felt a peace that he hadn't experienced since his wife died. His daughter was going to be okay. She was more than okay. She was thriving. And it was all because a quiet janitor with a broken heart had chosen to love again, despite all the pain she had suffered. That evening, James called Maria into his office one more time. "Maria, I have something to tell you," he said. "What is it, sir?" she asked. "I'm setting up a foundation in Diego's name. It's going to help children who are struggling with trauma and loss. Children like Isabella was. I want you to help me. Run it, not as an employee, but as a partner. You know better than anyone how to reach these kids. Will you help me help them?" Maria stared at him in shock. "You would do that? You would honor my son's memory like that?" James nodded. "Diego's short life made a difference. Maria, it taught you how to love children who are hurting, and that love saved my daughter. The least I can do is make sure his name helps save other children too." Maria started crying, really crying, for the first time since Diego's funeral. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll help you. Diego would have loved that." 5 years later, the Diego Santos Foundation had helped over 300 children work through trauma and loss. Maria had gone back to school to become a certified child therapist, but she never stopped folding paper animals or sitting on floors with scared little kids. Isabella, now 12 years old, volunteered at the foundation every weekend teaching other children how to make origami butterflies and cranes. She was confident, happy, and kind. with no trace of the broken little girl she had once been. On the anniversary of the day Maria first knocked on James's office door, the three of them sat together in the foundation's main room, surrounded by paper animals of every color and size. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" James asked. "If you hadn't knocked on my door that day? If you had just walked past and minded your own business?" Maria looked at Isabella, who was carefully teaching a new volunteer how to fold a paper rose. "I think about it sometimes," she said. "But then I remember that some things are meant to happen. Diego's death was a tragedy that I'll never get over. But maybe, in some way, he led me to Isabella. Maybe he knew she needed someone who understood what it felt like to be lost and scared. Maybe that's why I was working in your building at exactly the right time." Isabella looked up from her paper folding. "I think Diego and Mommy are friends now, up in heaven," she said matter-of-factly. "I think they're both happy that we found each other." James and Maria exchanged a look, both thinking the same thing out of the mouths of babes. "You know what?" James said, standing up and walking over to the big window that looked out over the city. "I think you're right, Isabella. And I think they're both proud of the amazing woman you've become and the incredible foundation we've built together." As the sun set over Sterling Tower, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Maria thought about the long journey that had brought her to this moment. She had lost everything once: her son, her husband, her faith in the world. But sometimes, when you think your story is over, life gives you a new chapter. Sometimes, the most broken people are the ones who know best how to heal others. And sometimes, the simplest acts of kindness, sitting on a floor, folding a piece of paper, choosing to love again despite the risk of more pain, can change everything. No one could handle the millionaire's daughter until a janitor did the impossible. She didn't fix Isabella with expensive therapy or fancy techniques. She fixed her with love, patience, and the wisdom that comes from surviving your own darkness. And in saving James Sterling's daughter, Maria Santos found a way to honor her son's memory and heal her own wounded heart. Because that's what love does. It takes our deepest pain and transforms it into our greatest gift to the world. The foundation continued to grow, and Maria's story became legendary among the families they helped. She never sought credit or recognition, but word spread about the quiet woman who could reach any child, no matter how lost or frightened they seemed. Parents would travel from other states just to bring their children to meet with Maria, hoping for the same miracle that had happened to Isabella Sterling. And more often than not, Maria would work that magic again, not through any special training or expensive equipment, but through the simple power of understanding, patience, and unconditional love. Years passed, and Isabella grew into a beautiful, confident young woman who never forgot the lessons Maria had taught her about resilience, kindness, and the importance of helping others who were struggling. She went on to study psychology in college, inspired by Maria's example to dedicate her own life to helping children overcome trauma. The cycle of healing continued, one paper butterfly at a time, one child at a time, one act of love at a time. And somewhere in heaven, a little boy named Diego smiled down on the woman who had turned her grief into grace, her sorrow into service, and her broken heart into a beacon of hope for countless others.